Welcome to Current Affairs on JTV. Earlier today, I was joined by Dr Qanta Ahmed, a British Muslim physician whose day job is studying sleep disorders, but who's also a stalwart campaigner for human rights and for change in the Middle East. She's the author of In the Land of Invisible Women, detailing her medical experience in Saudi Arabia. Qanta, thank you very much for joining me. Now, you're a British Muslim living in New York who's advocating for Israel. What is it that's brought you to this particular path, and why specifically does BDS worry you?
Great question, Alan. It's very clear for me. I'm an observant Muslim, and because I am an observant Muslim, I'm committed to combating Islamism. Islamism, as you know, is a political totalitarian ideology, one of the central tenets of which is Islamist anti-Semitism. And that concerns me greatly as a Muslim, but also as an academic. You are aware that there is a rising movement to call for boycotts of institutions in Israel, including academic institutions.
And is there a particular route you've taken in to this BDS challenge?
Yes, I was actually catapulted into that movement when I came across an article in July 2014. By that time, I'd already made several visits to Israel for various reasons. And I encountered a document called the Open Letter for the People of Gaza, which I read with interest as a physician who's published in that journal too, thinking that I would learn about the public health circumstances of people in the conflict, and instead discovered that Israeli academics, Israeli physicians and scientists were labeled as genocidaires. And I found that an extraordinary abuse of academic freedom, and shocking that it would come from within my world of medicine. At the time, I contacted my colleagues and my friends, the foremost President Peretz Levy, the president of the Technion University, where I'd already visited as an interested citizen, wondering what life at an Israeli academic institution was like. And that led to me authoring a rebuttal that was eventually published in the Lancet, condemning that attitude, and that's when I learned about the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement.
Okay, why do you think many more Muslims don't share the point of view you've just put out to us?
I think there's a complete lack of awareness about life in Israel for Israeli Jews, Israeli Arabs. Israeli Arabs include Muslims, Christians and Druze. There's a complete lack of awareness that Israel is home. 1 in 5 people that makes a home in Israel is not Jewish. And if you look at the academic sector, and I'm very familiar with the Technion, that percentage of minority individuals, however you define them, has a far greater presence inside academe. We know that on average Israel's population is 23% Arab, and we have almost the same numbers that are studying at the Technion. But if you look at medicine, which is my academic field, the year that I visited, of 130 medical students enrolled, 50 were Arabs who are Israelis, most of them Muslims. I also am a physician who's practiced medicine in Saudi Arabia, and have realized that the manifestation of Islam in Muslim majority countries deviates greatly from major principles of Islam, which include pluralism and recognition of people to choose their own belief systems and have valued beliefs that we cherish in the Quran. Yet we persecute them religiously in the country of my parental heritage, Pakistan, where Christians, minority Muslims and other individuals are penalized and do not have electoral representation. Discovering what Israel means to me and realizing that I have met with, for instance, Israeli Supreme Justice, who is Salem Jabran, who is a Christian Arab and an Israeli, adjudicating the Supreme Court. I've met with Muslim Palestinians born in Nazareth, who are women who are valedictorians in Technion's medical schools. That sense or that perspective is completely lacking. But there's also a lack of individual will on the part of many Muslims to learn about Judaism, Jewry, and thereby learn about Israel. However, that lack of will is also missing among great numbers of American Jewry, with which I'm also familiar. For instance, I work in a terrific medical practice where many of my partners happen to be American and Jewish. Few of them have visited Israel anywhere near the number of times I have, and most of their children have not visited Israel. And that is also a deficit in knowledge.
Now, you've made a number of interesting points, but I want to look just for a second on this sort of pooling of Arab, Israeli, Jewish sort of talent at universities and places like that. You quite often hear Palestinian academics, some of whom have had education in Israeli universities, saying Israel's an apartheid state. I presume you completely reject this point
Yes,
of view.
I reject this, and I reject this, number one, on being able to meet and work and fundraise for institutions. I'm here in London supporting the Technion, where we've just completed a successful program to raise support for the Technion, important work that Technion UK does. But also, I understand academic opportunities as they exist in the United States, in Britain, and elsewhere in the Middle East. And I see no barrier to academic and thereby economic opportunities to people in Israel based on their religion, based on their ethnicity, or based on their gender. I was a child when the apartheid government of South Africa was in existence and was subjugated, but I have met with South Africans who lived under apartheid and understand what that was about. And I've also lived in a society which practices true gender apartheid. I was a privileged woman, meaning I was a woman who was working with a profession, making a big income in Saudi Arabia, but I was designated a legal minor. I was denied the right of movement, literally, in a car from my home to my work, and also literally meaning not being able to enter or exit the country without a symbolic male guardian. I had to take informed consent for surgery on my patients from male children because their mother was not legally authorized to give consent. Again, an anathema to Islam, but clear evidence of apartheid. So if we put Saudi Arabia aside, let's talk about the world's first Muslim majority country. I have met with minorities in Pakistan who are Christians, a very beleaguered group in Pakistan, minority Muslims who are particularly discriminated in Pakistan, and learnt how some of them are denied the vote or electoral representation. The one and only Christian cabinet minister in Pakistan was executed for attempting to protest the blasphemy laws, and one of the most preeminent Muslim politicians who wanted to challenge the blasphemy laws was also executed for that. So I understand gender apartheid, and I understand apartheid that occurs in democracies claiming to be democracies, even worse, recognized by democracies like ours here in Britain and mine in the United States as legitimate democratic states who are exercising discriminatory and persecutory policy.
Okay. So you raise a good point. Why aren't we seeing protests against Pakistan, protests against Saudi Arabia, but we do see protests against Israel? What's really driving this?
So I think that there may be a number of reasons. I think there is a deep-rooted anti-Semitism, which I consider a revival or a new anti-Semitism, which is greatly fueled by Islamist ideology. It's not new in the sense that I know that Shakespeare wrote about anti-Semitism, and I know that anti-Semitism existed even earlier at the times of the Spanish Inquisition and probably further back. I don't have that knowledge. But a 20th century brand of anti-Semitism, which was initially a distortion of European anti-Semitism imported into Arab nations, first embraced by secular Arabs, later embraced secular Arab nationalists, later embraced by Muslims in that community, and then religionized, given an imprint of Islam, given an invented validity within Islam that has really taken root and actually is in the philosophy of major groups that we have to encounter like Hamas and Hezbollah, who clearly explicitly identify the Jew or Judaism as a cosmic enemy, not a mortal enemy. Therefore it becomes a sacrament to persecute the Jew, to eradicate the Jewish state. This theme that's coursing in large numbers of people in the ether infects the intellectual space. I think there is another component which I understand less well, but I've heard a lot about here in Britain, is an embrace by the left. I don't even like to call it liberal, because I think people in the center and people on the right can also be liberal. But there's an extreme embrace of rejection of Americanism, globalization, Zionism by extension, an understanding of colonialism in a way that projects white supremacist colonialism on the Israeli state, and therefore rejecting that is somehow upholding democratic and pluralist values. It's an incredibly ignorant marriage of left and Islamism that has gained fervor. And I think many of the individuals who are doing that have a poor understanding of secular liberal democracy, zero understanding of Islamism, and no insight or understanding of Israel. And I think there's a psychological reason too, which I don't have evidence for. It's just a suspicion. But Israel is an extraordinary nation. It's just a year younger than Pakistan. And it's fun for me to compare both, because both were created by the same United Nations at around the same time by the same international forces in order to protect a religious minority that had known persecution. Clearly, the Jews were persecuted almost to extinction through the Holocaust, and Muslims in British India felt that they might be in thread in the new Home Rule India. So both were a form of Zion, one a Jewish Zion, theological and spiritual, one a Muslim Zion, which was purely political. In that short period of time, we have an incredible intellectual output in terms of the number of patents per capita emerging from Israel. Technion is rightly known as the startup nation in terms of its productivity. Its incredible management of water resources, so that Israel engages in hydro diplomacy with over 150 nations. Its remarkable technology, its many aspects of its technology. In the surrounding region, which is awash in some of the most remarkable wealth that we've seen in modern history through the oil industry, there has been no advancement of education, technology, the political structure that could be anywhere remotely comparable. I've been in Israel's Knesset, and I've met with Muslim Arab members of the Knesset who are elected and represent parts of the Israeli population and have belligerently democratic discussions with their opponents in this so-called apartheid state, when there is not democratic and elected power in the surrounding regions to the same sense. That discrepancy, this tiny state where I can go from north to south in a matter of hours, generates intolerable envy. And if one is confronted with a competitor, a neighbor, a rival, that despite insurmountable obstacles, countless wars. I mean, I've only visited Israel for a couple of years, and I've already been witnessed the unfolding of one war. In my consciousness, being knowledgeable about Israel, there have already been 3 wars. I don't know how many wars Israel has confronted, yet it continues to overcome and surpass. And that envy is so intolerable for those who behold it that they must discharge their pain towards the object of their envy. And that breeds the hostility. People ask me, is Israel the cause for Islamism? I was asked that question. No. Just as Jews may ask, am I the cause of anti-Semitism? Anti-Semitism is such a rare hatred. It's a prejudice, it's a lethal hatred, and we know it culminates in genocide. But the hate that goes into anti-Semitism is always masked as a defensive hate. Israel threatens our existence. Israel doesn't want us to exist. The Jew threatens to reorganize world order, so I must defensively hate and hope for his or her annihilation. That's the distortion of anti-Semitism that is different than racism, different than xenophobia towards Muslims. And I think that that's adequate fuel for the BDS movement to be able to coach itself very effectively on waves of ignorance and on foundations of fallacy. A fallacy that boycotting Israel somehow liberates and advances the rights of Palestinians. A fallacy that Israel is at foundation an apartheid state. And a fallacy that denying access, academic, cultural and economic freedom to the very sectors of Israeli population that are already coexisting, that are the intelligentsia that could potentially lead 2 nations into a peaceful existence, to exclude and render them pariah is the third fallacy, which is the most ignorant of all. It's shameful that this climate is existing in Britain, the Britain that produced a Muslim like me, the Britain where my parents as Muslims have made homes for 6 or 7 decades. It's really a shameful state of affairs.
Well, Qanta, we've covered vast amounts of ground in a very short amount of time, but we have reached the end of our allotted period. So I want to thank you for joining me today, and thank you all for joining us at Current Affairs at JTV.